Nick, how's it going?
Hey Pete, good to see you.
Likewise, absolutely fantastic to have you here. Hey everyone, you are in for an absolutely fantastic treat because we've got Mr. Nick Mehta here, CEO of Gainsight. He's joined us for Revenue Excellence Summits before, so he's a great person to round out this day with. Nick, before we get into introductions, I'm noticing the Hogwarts sweatshirt there. Which class are you in?
I don't know. I thought I was Gryffindor because I thought it was the nice guy. Then I think I took a test on Pottermore and I was Slytherin. But then I've changed a lot now, so I think I might actually be Hufflepuff. So I'm very house confused right now. So
I love it. I love it. Well, my 6-year-old has been getting into the Harry Potter Legos as of
it's so fun.
as of late. Yes, it's that and the Ninjago ones.
Yeah,
Well,
remember those
well,
for sure. Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. Well, everyone, thank you very much for joining us. For folks who don't know me, my name is Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. We make a AI sales management platform that helps organizations improve performance through the better application of data. Also, one of the founders of Modern Sales Pros here. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called Talentbin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014, and that's really kind of where I went from being a business generalist founder, like with a product management and product marketing background, to a sales rep, sales manager, sales leader, etc. And that's kind of how I got introduced to modern sales. So that's a little bit on me. For folks who haven't been under a rock, you might be familiar with Nick and of course Gainsight, the market leaders and market innovators in customer success platforms. But Nick, maybe you could give a little bit of an introduction to folks of yourself.
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, Pete, I think you undersold yourself in two ways. One is you've done an incredible job with the sales community. So I just really appreciate that. Not kidding. We all learned a lot. And then our team, shameless plug, uses Atrium internally. And it's actually, I think, out of all our sales tech, one of the most beloved technologies in our team. So kudos to what your team's doing to build this stuff. So I'm Nick Mehta, CEO of Gainsight, as Pete mentioned. I think just to give a little bit more on sort of the vision we have and what we're seeing in the market. We've been doing Gainsight for 11 years. And 11 years ago, companies were starting to move these SaaS models and realizing that churn was a big deal and it was all about preventing churn. They created a CSM team. We built software for those teams and became kind of the main player in that space. What we figured out more recently, and I think this ties to our conversation, is it's not just about churn mitigation. It's about really net revenue retention and growth and advocacy, right? There you go, a little pause there. And it's not just about the CSM team. It's mobilizing that whole customer journey.
Sure.
So we've evolved from kind of one product, which is customer success, to now having 4 products. One about getting your customers into a community, talk to each other. One about driving customer education and learning. One about driving adoption in your product, and more to come. Our vision is really to be the customer platform that manages everything post-sales. So it's a little bit about us.
Yeah, for sure. Activate. I mean, yes, I love how Nick has his books behind him over his left shoulder there.
Very subtle, very subtle.
Very subtle. Well, it's actually we're big fans of continuous learning here at Atrium, and we actually have this program called Smart as a Fox, where if people read a specific, one of a set of business books, and then write up a book report on it, they get a modest spiff there, and of course, and well, yeah, and so your books are on that for the CS team, and along with some other ones as well. But I think it's a really important kind of point that you bring up there is it's a journey, right? It's all the way from transaction to implementation to initial success and kind of like proof, as Jocko van der Kooi from Winning by Designs likes to say. Recurring revenue comes from recurring impact.
Yeah.
And so like if you want to have, and one of my favorite books, business books, is by Bill Walsh. It's called The Score Takes Care of Itself.
I read that. It's a great book.
Yeah, and so the whole idea here is that it's very difficult to focus on lagging indicators like logo retention or NRR or what have you. They're very important, but the mechanism by which you have success with respect to these lagging indicators, of course, is by focusing on leading indicators. And so what that means is making sure that organizations are adopting your solution, getting to outcomes, and that means a variety of things like being well implemented, being well educated, being well activated, and kind of going along the whole journey there. So I think one thing that I would love to kind of talk about, and I liked how you kind of characterize this, people have maybe historically thought of like the CS function as kind of being like the relationship holder, maybe a little bit more reactive. Like when somebody's got a problem, the CSM is there for them to, to get in contact with, or, and then maybe reporting out things from a QBR or what have you, versus kind of being more proactive in ensuring that organizations are like getting success and adopting, and especially in order to drive upsell, right? More consumption, or even just like more value capture in order to drive more NRR. And so I guess what my question to you would be is, given the fact that organizations are very, very revenue focused in all things right now, not just like new business acquisition, but it's also, hey, here's the CS function. Can you turn it, like the CFO is saying, can you turn it into dollars and cents as to how this is driving NRR, driving expansions, what have you? How is that impacting the way that customer success organizations not just operate themselves, but also operate with respect to, their other kind of teammates in the organization?
Absolutely. A great question. I think that, you're right. Historically, I think the evolution of it is customer success might have started out as like the troubleshooting team, like a little more advanced version of support, right? You have technical issues, or, kind of people call that like firefighting. And then it turned to what I call like the more squishy metrics. And that's not a negative thing, but just like the NPS, CSAT, very good and important. But actually, I was talking to a customer the other day, and they're like, we've done the correlation, and they have like super high NPS, and they have super high churn, and it has nothing to do with their likely to retain, because it's more about like the experience, which matters, but it's the customer stays because of outcomes and grows because of outcomes. So then there was this kind of phase of what I'll call adoption focus, right? Which is great. Are they using the product? What are they using? Which again is important, but nobody buys a product to log into it. They buy a product to get some value, right? Like we use Atrium, and you can look at our adoption stats, and that would be useful. But in an ideal world, you would know, hey, Nick, is this helping Gainsight drive more sales? Right? That's like the outcome that I care about, right? Mm-hmm. And if we were doing like a tech stack consolidation, we'd be like, well, this is a cool product, people use it, but is it really driving sales or not? Right? That's especially right now, right? And then you get to this model of, okay, we better as a CS team impact financial metrics directly, right? That's where, whether it's renewals or upsell or like cross-sell, right? Or even advocacy, you got to have a hard metrics on tying to that. Now, what are the things that are happening out of that? Number one is CS leaders are signing up for revenue number. And I think that before there was this kind of like, I think a bit dogmatic belief that revenue is a bad thing. Which I'm always like, well, I don't know if you understand how the company makes money. So people, it's not a nonprofit, right? And so people would kind of say, hey, if you're tied to revenue, then you can't be good at customer success. I'm like, well, no, if you have a good product, then customers spending money with you is a good thing for them too. If you don't believe you have a good product, then go work at a company where you believe in the product, right? And so this idea that sales is not a 4-letter word, it's actually a 5-letter word, but it's not a 4-letter word, right? So own a revenue number. I always tell people, like, you either own a number or long-term, you probably won't have a job. I mean, just realistically, in a bubble, you can have this squishy kind of job. In a time like now, the people that are being kept are the people that have a direct tie to financial metrics. So number one is own a number, right? That's one big trend happening. Second big, it could be renewal expansion. Second big trend is, people are saying, I need to be able to correlate my impact to that number. Because of course, like people always wonder, well, you own a number, but if you weren't there, what would happen, right? Even with salespeople, you could say I have 100 salespeople, but if I had 50, would have the same bookings or not, right? That's the logical thing. So having that case to the CFO, I was just talking to a CS leader yesterday, how to build the case to the CFO for her role and how it ties to financial metrics. Number three is some people are moving account management, meaning cross-sell, upsell, under the CCO or head of CS as well. We just did that. We moved account management under our CCO, Kelly, Kelly's amazing. And she's very like performance and revenue oriented. And so we moved it under because we saw a lot of synergy between expansion and customer success. And we have 4 products now, so there's a lot of cross-sell. And then finally, number 4, it's not universally true, but certainly more of a trend towards a leader, you could call it a CRO or a president, that has both the new business and the customer success existing business under that one leader. It's not universal. Some CEOs have a CCO reporting directly to them, especially if there's a big problem to be fixed. But over time, I just see consistently like an integrated customer journey leader and new sales and existing kind of reporting into them.
Yeah, I think that especially with the way that modern SaaS tools and products in general work, it's a rarer and rarer case that something goes full wall to wall, full suite from the very, very get-go.
That's right. It's all landed,
And
right? Yeah.
yeah, and this isn't to say that it's like, land and expand like, PLGE, kind of like, Dropbox or whatever, but like, I was hanging out with the SVP of sales operations at a Workday the other day, and the prototypical example that I love to use of a product that you can't really like land, like let's just test out the HRAS.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was, he was like, well, actually, we have like 6 incremental modules.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right, where like they have the HRAS, and then they have like this company Adaptive Insights, like their planning software, and then of course they've got their finance thing, and then exactly they bought Scout RFP, and so I think that that's a very kind of key thing, and it really characterizes how how the account management relationship has to be characterized. Like it could be semantics around like, oh, well, the account executive is also responsible for cross-sell in organizations through the first 12 months or 24 months or whatever. It's like, okay, well, that's an account management behavior. We can call it an account executive. That's cool, like whatever. And so and I think a lot of folks maybe kind of struggle with kind of like the nomenclature and like the expectations, but like it's really kind of like more who's got the job, or like the jobs to be, like what are the jobs to be done, and then who are the owners of those. And so that might be like, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's such a good example. So Workday's been a Gainsight customer for like 10 years. And I've seen that evolution. When they bought Gainsight 10 years ago, it was about driving stuff around NPS, which is great, right? And then it got into like doing more proactive customer success with adoption. Then it got more into what we call success plans, which are more around the client's outcomes. Then they, as you were alluding to, they put a big focus on cross-sell. They created this customer-based sales team, right? And in some cases, what people do is they have this customer-based sales team and they have the main account executive. They kind of double comp on cross-sell. I actually don't know which way Workday does it, but then that customer-based sales team actually, in our case, started using Gainsight for kind of the account planning, cross-sell, upsell, right? And I think just shows the evolution of what CS is in companies from this like customer sat to now this revenue generated. I didn't mean to interrupt you. It was just such a good example.
But I think it's a really important thing. Like, I don't know, I'm such a sports guy, so forgive me, everybody. But like, it's kind of like, and I know that Nick is a really big football guy. He's a big Steelers fan. But it's kind of like this, when you're at the line of scrimmage, like I got you. I got like, exactly. I got you.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, cool. Like, who is responsible? My co-founder is a big Rasky model, because he came from he worked at eBay like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And it's like, who's the responsible human for expansions?
That's right.
Who's the responsible human for renewals?
Yeah.
And like that could be a different human. Like who's the responsible human for like selling the incremental like product? Like those could be assigned to different people. Like, oh, this TSM is responsible for the renewal, but the account executive should be running throughout the rest of the organization, taking down incremental teams or whatever. It's fine, like however you want to structure it. And ideally it should overlap with like, the way that like the product maybe like works within the organization. Like let's use Workday as another example there. Typically Workday probably like lands in the HR organization because it's an HRIS function, and then of course they have a finance product which is like a really big, it's a huge engineering investment. Probably makes sense for the account executive to go and like continue to attack that because it's a totally different part of the organization.
Exactly.
You're talking to different humans, right? Whereas like CSAM might be responsible for the renewal on the the HRIS or what have you, or whatever is being like what has already been hunted down. Whatever it is that you're doing, and just like make sure that it's like cool, man. Like make sure that every linebacker has like a man,
Yep.
like assigned to them, because like otherwise like it's gonna be a very sad time.
You're speaking my language for sure. I love that. I think that I love the breaking down of expansion. Like I wrote a blog post long time ago, and it was like people talking about expansion like it's one thing, but there's same stakeholder, more entitlements, users, etc. Then there's same stakeholder, more like feature modules. Then there's like different stakeholder, same product. Then there's different stakeholder, different product. And then so all these dimensions, I find similar to you that as you get further away from your core stakeholder. For example, in our case, we sell the customer success product to like a chief customer officer, but we sell our product analytics product typically to a chief product officer. Totally. And those, like a CSM person, it's harder to do both of those, right? But selling more entitlements and users to your core stakeholder, that can be done as part of the natural process. In fact, I think a lot of companies, they pay the AE for that, but it's like so automatic. It's like, I mean, it's no disrespect to AEs, but it'll just happen no matter what, right?
Yeah.
In fact, like the future state probably for companies is that more entitlements thing should just be in the product. You click a button, you get add users, you click a button, you add customers or whatever your metrics are, and it just increases your billing, right? That's the ideal.
Yeah. Well, so I think we're kind of talking about kind of some themes there around what is the focus on how you can drive more revenue. You can own a number, and make sure that that you're signed up for that. But in terms of like tacticality, what are like actions that revenue organizations can take right now, not just revenue organizations, right, to better preserve NRR. And I'll give an example, because this is something that we're contending with here at Atrium, because we're kind of in this interesting spot where we have kind of like a little bit of like a legacy customer base, a little bit kind of like smaller organizations, which is typically like how when you're like creating a new category, you're trying to get in where you can fit in, sort of thing. So we have these like Series A and Series B customers that are, a lot of them are maybe reducing their sales organizations, et cetera. And then we have these kind of what we call ICP 2.0 for us, which are, big kid sales organizations like a Gainsight or a Stack Overflow or like, a Druva or BetterUp or what have you, like 10, 20, 40 sales managers or whatever that are using Atrium to measure and manage their teams. And so one of the things that like as part of our customer base kind of like, atrophies a little bit, which is a bummer, but like, welcome to, reality. One of the things that we've kind of challenged our organization to do very specifically is say, hey man, like you're not going to save them, girl, right? Like you're not going to save them, boy. Like if their sales organization is like gone, like if they went from a 20-person sales organization to a 3-person sales organization, like let's like, kiss them, treasure it, Marie Kondo it, right? But but it's because like all you have is your calendar, right? Like all you have is your time in the
Yeah.
in the week. And so we've permissed our team to say like, hey, look, like we need to focus on the organizations that are going to be going concerns, and are going to be like growth and are kind of the future of Atrium. And so that's like one thing, which is rather than kind of saying like every logo is sacred and saying like, hey, look, like that sales organization is probably going to go away. I'm going to redirect my time and energy into this organization that has 20 sales managers right now and is probably going to go to 30 across the next year. So that like essentially just like, being eyes wide open about like what's worth the time and what's not worth the time is one thing. What are other tactics you might have seen in your customer base around how their revenue teams can drive better NRR right now in kind of like a problematic economic environment?
I love that you mixed Marie Kondo and customer success. That's good revenue growth. That's super cool. So if you take NRR and like unpack it, right? So you can think of like almost like a column chart, right? So what's in NRR, right? So there's some what I call headwinds that hurt NRR, and there's some tailwinds that grow it, right? So the headwinds, as you were alluding to, you got full churn, full logo churn. Somebody just leaves you altogether. And I love the idea of like writing off the ones that aren't just going to work. And frankly, not pushing a rock uphill. When you push a rock uphill, as you alluded to, you waste time that can go other places. By the way, you also kind of annoy the customer. Like, in other words, some of these companies are like, we're running out of money. And you're like, how come we can't get our software deployed? They're like, we're trying to pay our people. Like, it's like you are very low on the Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah. Read the room, bro.
Read the room. Yeah. So don't send them the 17th email or whatever. Cut your losses. I love that. Now, in full logo churn, you kind of think about what drives it. So one of them is sort of economics, which you don't have much control over. There's another one, which is stakeholder change. So I think one of the biggest things everyone can do tomorrow is have an extremely good process. Like, if, for example, Pete, if we had changes in sales leadership, right, you want to be all over that new person. There's a lot of tactics. Know that it happened. Have a really tight email, not like a 7-paragraph email, but a tight one about what they're doing with you. Nurture them, the new stakeholder, and eventually ask for a meeting, but don't ask for an hour meeting, ask for 25 minutes. When you in that meeting, what's in it for them? Well, it's probably something like, let me tell you my observations of what your team's been doing. Like, if there's new sales leader Gainsight, which hopefully there won't be, you can go to that person and be like, let me tell you what your manager's doing and some opportunities, right? Which is hoping that new person take the meeting, right? Let me tell you how you compare with other competitors, right? Things like that. So what's the value for them? Probably nurturing them with videos, send them a gift basket when they take the job. There's a lot of tactics. So that's stakeholder change. The other reason people drop stuff now is they're just not using it enough. So obviously that's where your adoption, your CS motions, getting more user advocates that can attest to procurement or whatever, that they're getting value. So now you go. So we talked about full churn, right? What other headwinds are there? There's less entitlement. So in other words, I have 50 users, now I have 20. Some of that because they just have a certain number of people in sales or CS or whatever. Some of it could be that, people aren't getting value. Maybe they're shrinking one team or taking off. And that's obviously where adoption, user stories, for example, we'll ask people in app, what's their NPS score, but then we'll ask them like feedback. And then you end up with a bunch of like, these users love Gainsight or, Atrium or whatever, right? So users price up a lot. Then you've got price decrease, right? Which usually comes from procurement. Huge thing now, right? Every procurement team is like, we're going to cut 15% on every vendor, right? 20%, right? It's kind of like a Geico commercial. It's like 15% or more. And it's that kind of thing, right? What do you do there? Well, you want to be sticky, right? So get stuff that's hard to rip out. You want to be confident, understand, empathetic, but confident that procurement's job's X. Go to the business person and text them and say, hey, what's going on here? Is this real or not? Right? That we do that all the time. And then you want to have good evidence. What are the outcomes we've driven? What's the user stories? Like in your case, let's say Gainsight procurement. We use outsourced procurement, but let's say they came to you and said, hey, we need 15% off. You should totally give us 15% off, by the way, Pete. But let's say
we already did last time.
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah. It was an exchange for a 10-year contract.
There you go. I love it. So, let's say procurement from any, customer comes to one of you vendors, right? and says, we want 15% off, know that that's their job, and that's a starting point, right? That's a starting point. It's negotiable. Like you said, you can trade it for a longer term contract. So we've talked about full churn. We've talked about fewer entitlements. We've talked about price discounts. There's probably a couple other things. Let's talk about the positive tailwinds. What can actually drive growth? I think one thing you said is really good. Overinvest in the customers that are growing. To have a metric that you can see, whether it's usage of your platform, or I think even better, hiring data. So in your case, which companies are hiring reps? In our case, they're hiring CSMs. We look at that data on LinkedIn overall obsessively. And interesting fact, in the last year in LinkedIn, the CSM population has been roughly flat, right? No surprise. Before that, it was growing, 20, 30% a year. But within that flat, there's some people are growing and some people are shrinking. Who are those people that are growing, right? And go over and invest in that, put more CSM time on them, more sales time. That's more entitlements. Then you've got, okay, how do I get more products in there? This cross-sell, right? If you have multiple products. And there, what I think is really effective is a vendor consolidation pitch. So in our case, our customers might use us for CS and they use something else for community, education, in-app, guides. Just had a customer kind of briefing very recently where we walk through like all the tools they're using, benefit of doing it all in Gainsight. They'll save money, have more integration, better customer experience, more efficiency. You should have a really good vendor consolidation pitch if you have multiple products. And frankly, right now, because there is churn and downsell and less upsell, this is the thing that will be your lifeboat during tough economies is cross-sell and vendor consolidation. So those are some ideas.
Totally. I would love to. So thank you for the very thoughtful framework there, Nick. Now I am going to hang some tactics that we use on your framework, just so folks can, maybe consider them or maybe disregard them. New champion arrival, or sorry, new stakeholder arrival, excuse me. Super critical. I think it goes back to so our head of CS is this woman, Bridget Seacard, who has read all your books and a bunch of other. She's very, very sharp and a student of the game. And so one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is that like usage is not enough, which you said. And so when someone shows up, a VP of sales operations, a CRO, et cetera, those are our stakeholders, kind of our big kid stakeholders. Like managers are the ones who are like using the heck out of Atrium on a day-by-day basis. One of the things, so first what we use is we use a functionality, or sorry, a tool called user gems for tracking kind of
changes.
So both people who are coming, like titles who are showing up in any of our hundreds and hundreds of customers. So like if a title of VP of sales operations or director of sales operations or whatever, a CRO shows up, we get like a ping and it gets inserted into the into various systems. But then importantly, it's like, okay, cool, like how are you going to get them to actually connect with you? At this point, like literally what we do is we hit them up and we say, hey, congratulations, we'd like to send you a bottle of champagne.
We do the same thing.
Oh, yeah. And the funny thing about it is, and like you guys have a much higher ASP than we do, but if you think about it, like, a $50 bottle of like Veuve Clicquot or whatever, it's like not a big deal. As compared to welcoming this CRO or what have you. So that's the first thing. Another thing that you had kind of mentioned was around like eliciting customer stories. We do a bunch of tech touch stuff across our customer base. We kind of have it like kludged together a little bit. Like we use we actually use kind of our CSMs use a sales engagement solution called Mixmax that they'll send. It has a poll functionality where you can essentially just ask it like, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, how big of an advocate for renewal would you be of Atrium, and they do this on a recurring basis, and for the people who are like, oh, 5, right, and then it's like, okay, why? And now you've got these like great stories and what have you, and for people who are like 3 or like 2, and we're just like, oh, okay, whoa, what's going on here, like tackle, right?
What do we do about that?
And you want to be like way ahead of that, right? Like you don't want to find that out like 30 days from the renewal, right? So that there's that. And then you were talking about outcomes. one of the things, we actually have an internal terminology here. We call them VBOs, a verified business outcome.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so one of the, like, that's actually something that the CSMs are measured on and also compensated on. And so in our case with Atrium, the thing that's like kind of weird and a little like, metaphysical is that we make analytics software that will actually like tracks whether or not your like win rates are going up, or your like prospecting activity going up, or like your bookings are per rep are going up, or your pipeline hygiene, your untouched opportunities are going down. And actually we have this, like, as part of our software, we have these anomaly detection systems. We've actually used that as a mechanism by which to feed kind of VBO candidates to our CSM, so the CSM can be like, oh, cool, this organization that I'm working with has seen a 30% rise in self-sourced pipeline by the account executives. Great, we're going to capture that, we're going to catalog it, we're going to share it with the customer, and like we're gonna score a touchdown, spin the ball, right? Like everyone's gonna like do a dance around it. But importantly, what we're gonna do is we're gonna persist this off such that at the midway point in the contract, and of course 90 days before renewal, we now have like 10 of these VBOs or whatever just sitting right there. And so those are some of the tactics that we do in order to like drive the behaviors that Nick was kind of characterizing there. Nick, anything you wanted to add before we kind of move on to a different topic here?
Well, I love that. I mean, the only quick thing I'd add, which I think every salesperson would understand, but we always forget it. We have to remind ourselves. When you reach out to a buyer, let's new stakeholder, existing, don't always be like transactional. Say, hey, love to get 30 minutes on your calendar, right? Like, it's honestly, when I get those emails, it's like, why? And I love it, right? I love instead to like have them basically email me some content to nurture me, get me interested, some videos, customer case, and then at some point they've proven enough value to say it's worth 25 minutes of my time, and really try to think about it not so transactionally, because buyers do not want to just get on calls with you for the heck of it, just from my
it's not their job. That's weird. Exactly. They have other things to.
Talking to vendors isn't a full-time job. Sometimes it could be if you don't do it right. So
yeah, if you're not careful. One thing I wanted to touch on is just kind of like pure like logo saves, right? And I think the important thing there is, like, one thing that we talked about was the notion of like identifying like you're not going to save them, girl, like situation, right? Like, okay, cool, like, but in situations where there's an opportunity for a logo save, one of the things that we have this internal terminology, you can tell that like we love to make up like silly phrases that are then like sticky in people's brains. We call it save the logo, save the world. And I forget what it was from. There was like some superhero show or whatever. Save the trilogy, save the world, right? And yeah, Bridget came up with this because she's, again, a very clever publicist.
Heroes, by the way. I think that was it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anyway, so save the logo, save the world, and what we mean by that is, frequently, if you lose the logo entirely, it can be really problematic to get back in the account. And if your solution, and not all solutions lend themselves to this, if your solution can hang on, right, exactly, and can have like a couple seats or or whatever, and like doesn't get quote unquote turned off, you'd be shocked what can end up happening there. Like we had this with like a customer who's in their 5th year with us, where like they had some like wobbliness like 3 years ago. They were precocious. They were having like sales organization riffs before it was cool, and they and they're like, I don't know, I think we're gonna have to turn you guys off. We love you. We're like, you know what? Like, why don't we just like, keep a seat for your sales operations function? Yeah. And like now they're this like huge, massive account for us, and they've grown as well, and what have you. But I think it was one of those things. If we had just been like, okay, like we love you, and like we'll try to get the win back later. I think there's like a very big difference between a win back behavior and like a hanging on by a thread. So that's like one thing I would kind of like coach everyone on is just like try to save the logo, try to save the world. Are there other kind of like, things that you would recommend around like, logo retention, and what have you?
I mean, I think one thing, I love yours, by the way. It's really great. We've seen the same thing. I think, getting like being willing to take a smaller contract to your point from a dollar perspective right now, whether it's a price concession or something like that, because you understand people are in harder times, but maybe only give that for a short period. Maybe it's a year and you can get that dollar value back up, so that's, I think just the dollar side of it too, being willing to take a hit on dollars is really important.
Yeah,
I
to
think,
keep it.
yeah, I think another one that is a longer play, but I wrote about this today on LinkedIn, which is people buy software now for a combination of the software, but also the knowledge and the community, the thought leadership in the community. You do a great job of this with MSP, right? And like I think you get a lot of credibility that what you're doing. And I'm not saying that there's things you couldn't learn about sales, just like I can learn a lot more
Yeah.
about customer success. But obviously, I've learned a lot. 11 years, met thousands of companies. With this big community, and so for us, we have this community called Pulse with tens of thousands of CSMs in it. And, a big chunk of the world is in that. All these books we've written, all that. And what that means is people get value from software, but they also get a lot of value from community and thought leadership. And so the more you can have those things, I think the more your logo retention can ride the ups and downs of the economy.
Yeah, for sure. The one last thing I would love to touch on before we wrap is in this scenario, and I think a lot of people are kind of in this situation right now where customers are churning. They are, they're going full logo churn.
Yeah.
But then and we see this quite a bit too, where maybe 60 days later they're like, maybe we shouldn't have done that.
100%, totally.
Like maybe we should. Ooh, man. Maybe we thought we were going to do XYZ, but like, boy, oh boy, turns out that was a hypothesis, right? And so I think that organizations are way less aggressive regarding winbacks than they could be. Especially like when you have a situation where there's a lot of like functionality that has been like in customization that has like been built out in a given solution or what have you. Would you have any sort of like recommendations around how organizations can be most effective in like, if you can't save the logo, can't save the world, can we like potentially get them back, and be proactive about getting them back?
100%, totally. This is something we've seen too, is people can churn and then come back 6 months, a year later. Actually, a funny one, just a little anecdote, is I remember a customer that years and years ago that churned, and then in that leader moved on, and there was a new leader that came in. Now the new leader, get this, the new leader talks to he talked to his team and said, why don't we have Gainsight in here? That doesn't make any sense. And the team's like, oh, we did, but we ended up churning it. And the new leader called us and said, why did you let us churn? And I'm like, I didn't want it. So here's some tactics that I think work complementary. Number one, be super kind and gracious on the way out. Do not burn that relationship. They'll be a customer again. We always have that expression, they always come back. At Gainsight, we say that. Number two is, your company evolves a lot. And so create good content, like what's changed in Gainsight since you've used it, right? What's changed? And so make that video, that whatever about what's changed. Like we've made our UI drastically better at Gainsight. So showing people those versus the old impression they have. Number three is nurture, right? So definitely nurture these clients ongoing basis, not just tag to them with the product, but it could be thought leadership or whatever. As nurture is so important because people wake up one day and say, oh, I should look at something, and it's be top of mind. Number four is educate your team in some way on what happened in the past. So in our case, obviously that's all in our Gainsight deployment. So let's say salesperson's working in a win back, they might be new to our company. They go look in Gainsight and say, oh, these guys were a client before. they churned. Here's what they didn't like. Here's what they liked. Here's what the advocates were. Make sure the sales team doesn't go in blind to this past customer and be like, let me tell you all about Gainsight. Let me show. And the customer's like, I used Gainsight for 5 years, and for whatever reason, we churned it. So don't go in like this is some net new logo, because it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally did that. Yeah, I think that the thing that one thing I might add to that, those are fantastic, is just like if you have a situation wherein the pain can be felt very quickly, around like an absence of something, or and then moreover if the organization intends, or like one of the reasons why they intend is because they intend to like either build in-house or like use Atrium as an example. Oh, we think we're going to go do all this stuff in like spreadsheets, or we're going to use our kind of like our core BI or whatever. And you know, the BI team said Scouts on, or we're going to do XYZ, and then like you want to wait the appropriate amount of time to then show up and then say, hey, did that happen?
Exactly.
Because and like that may not be applicable to your solution necessarily, but you want to think about like what the timing is.
Same thing for us, exactly. The alternative Gainsight mainly is customized Salesforce and use Tableau or something. And often, surprisingly, the IT projects that were promised never happen. It's shocking, but it's true.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Nick, this is absolutely fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us around, revenue and success revenue, right? Everyone, check Nick out on LinkedIn. He obviously puts out a ton of amazing content there, as does Gainsight. If you ever have the opportunity to work with the Gainsight folks, they're absolutely fantastic. We're big fans of their sales organization, their sales leadership diaspora. Looking forward to everyone having fun with us tomorrow here on the second day of the Revenue Excellence Summit. And then Nick, thank you very much. You have a great rest of your day. Okay.
No, I appreciate it, Pete. This has been great. And since we're both NFL fans, I think we do need to next time talk about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, because we need to digest that relationship. Probably much bigger news than anything we talked about. But
yeah, I feel that's like your two favorite things together there.
I question your taste in football teams though, but we'll talk about that next time. So awesome having me, Pete. I just really enjoyed it and love everything you do for the community. Thanks so much.
Okay, have a great rest of your day. Bye, Nick.